Joe Naisbitt, thank you very much for being with us today. It's a pleasure, sir.
Thank you for having me.
So China has been a mystery for scholars throughout centuries. Why is it such a challenge for thinkers up till these days?
Up till these days, you think everything is revealed now?
It's not. It's still a challenge. That's
no, it's still a challenge. It's still a challenge. Well, it's, you know, for thousands of years, it was such an insulated, isolated place that others didn't come in. And it's only been in recent years that a lot of people travel. I myself have been going there for 44 years, since 1967. But that's new for Westerners to spend so much time there. One or two did before, but now they're all over the place. Although I think the Western reporting is not very good about China, but there are a lot of people there. And my wife and I have been going there for the last 10 years. And but it's still kind of a mystery. It's because of their language. It's because it's a country now with no ideology. And someone said the other day that history was the religion of China. And I think that's true, in a sense, that that's the only thing that really holds everything together now. Not the only thing. But, you know, they have that kind of reverence for their history, which they know so well through all of the dynasties and so on, and which the West has almost zero information about, and that's why it's a big mystery.
You've touched upon the ideology and the fact that China has no ideology, but how good is it to be a country without an ideology when you're striving to be a superpower? Is it just enough to send a message only about economic prosperity without any other ideology?
Well, there's some concern about that, but China didn't have an ideology before communism, really. You know, they venerate Confucius, but that's not even a religion. It's kind of a code of living. So, and there are people searching in different directions. The United States, for example, doesn't have an ideology. I mean,
really?
No, I mean, you know, there's the American dream and so on, but, you know, the people have all kinds of ideologies, all kinds of religious faiths and so on. They're all over the place. And I guess the only thing that holds everyone together is the idea that there's freedom in the United States and you can make of yourself what you can and so forth. And a little of that is involved now in China too.
Here's another question. Everyone asks themselves, is China a socialism or is it a capitalism?
You know,
and I'm not even talking in terms of ideology, but in terms of a regime.
It's not socialism, but it's socialism with Chinese characters. Now, if you can figure out what that means, that would help a lot, because no one knows what it means. It's not a socialist country, it's not a communist country, but you know, here we're sitting in Russia. Now think about this. At the end of the last century, two great countries gave up communism, Russia and China. And what's happened? China's number two in the world economically. Russia's a little stuck in the mud by being too much energy in their economy and too little energy in their people. I mean, they lagged way behind of these two countries that gave up communism. Very interesting study. I don't think it's been done, but it's certainly an interesting question. I mean, how did China do it, and why is
Russia couldn't do it?
Why has Russia not done it, so to speak?
Well, we just brought up an interesting point. As for the BRIC countries, can they keep up with China's growth? Can that be a problem for BRIC countries, that China is developing so rapidly?
Let's put this in context. China has gone from 147th in the world to number 2 in the economy in the world in the last 33 years. But the U.S. economy is still 4 times bigger. The U.S. economy is way up here. And then clustered together are China, Germany, and Japan, way down here at only 1/4 or 1/3 the size of the U.S. So the U.S. only has to grow a couple of percentage points or 3 percentage points, and then China can still grow at 8 or 9, which it probably won't. But for it to be a long time, arithmetically, you can figure it out, before China catches up, if it ever does.
You know, regardless of all the growth, China does face some major problems like gender inequality, income inequality, corruption, even environmental issues. Could that undermine the growth?
Well, you know, all of these problems, and these are the problems of China, are talked about and written about in newspapers and magazines and in speeches all over China all the time. This is totally open. China says that their biggest problem is the growing inequality, the growing income gap between urban and rural. And the answer to your question is no, because it's so openly talked about. And we monitor in our institute in Tianjin, we monitor all of the provinces, and in the newspapers in all the provinces, the two biggest issues that are in the editorial pages and in the news pages are corruption and the environment, and dealing with both of those. These are issues that are not hidden. These are the most talked about things in China, and the leadership that brought China this far is a leadership that you have to imagine can continue to deal with those problems and can do a little better job as it goes along.
Now let's talk imperialism. As China is slowly growing ties with weaker Asia and African countries.
The kind of aid that China's giving to Africa and to some other countries differs very greatly from what the West did. When the West was giving, it was government to government, and who knows what happened to the money. The Chinese make a deal. They say, here's the deal. We will build you an airport, we will build you a sports stadium, and so forth, and you agree to sell us oil and energy we need at market price. And the Africans, many Africans describe that as a win-win arrangement versus what the West has been doing with their aid programs all these years. So China is absolutely connecting with Africa as well as Asia because of how smart they've been in the arrangements they have to create win-win situations with those countries.
So it's economy only and not the will to evolve into an imperialist state.
To build an empire?
Yeah.
No, China has never been an acquisitional country to begin with, but they're making their arrangements and their deals not to acquire anyone or to build an empire, but it's mostly on an economic basis to assure themselves of the resources that they need for the rapid growth they're experiencing and in our view will continue to experience.
So here's what also many people think, that with its economic and military growth, China is poised to become the center of the new multipolar world.
It's not a multipolar world, and by the way, they have been building their military, but it's still, the U.S. has a military that's equal to all the other militaries of the world put together. And we've heard a lot of talk about multipolar world, but last century it was the Soviet Union and the U.S. This century, to be very simple-minded about it, this century is the U.S. and China. That world is going to be dominated by the bipolar connection of China and the U.S. And countries will make decisions and calibrate their actions against what they perceive will be the response of the U.S. and or China. There will be a bipolar world replacing the Soviet Union and U.S., but on a very different basis.
So no Cold War?
Yes. A Cold War, but sort of a Cold War, but with the Soviet Union on an ideological basis, with China on an economic.
What do you think China's strategy is in relations to Russia?
China, well, I'll summarize the strategy. Russia is the biggest producer of oil in the world. China is the biggest consumer of energy in the world. That dictates the strategy.
Joe Nesbitt, thank you very much for this interview.
Thank you very much.